Welcome to Banyen Books, Branches of Wisdom, celebrating the joy of bright ideas and heartful lifelong learning. Branches of Wisdom is a series of intimate conversations with the world's most influential authors and visionaries. We explore spirituality and the human mind, ecology and culture. Most episodes are recorded with a live audience. You can join our live events and submit questions to your favorite guests. Check out our upcoming schedule at banyen.com. Since 1970, Banyen Books has been a rich oasis at the crossroads of wisdom and philosophy, offering resources for humanity's evolving paths. We're a locally owned, independent bookstore in the heart of Vancouver's Kitsilano neighborhood. Visit us in person or shop online at banyen.com. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews for the podcast. And now, enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Banyen Books podcast. I'm your host, Ross McKeechee. Today, I'm really excited that we are in conversation with Zenju Earthlyn Manuel. Osho Zenju Earthlyn Manuel is a poet, author, ordained Zen priest, and medicine woman of the drum who was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. As a child, she was referred to by the name her mother gave her, Earthlyn. Her middle name, Marceline, was her grandmother's name. Zenju is a Dharma name. Osho is a title meaning Zen teacher. She's the Dharma heir of Buddha and the late Zenkai Blanche Hartman in the Shunryu Suzuki Roshi lineage through the San Francisco Zen Center. Prior to entering Zen Buddhism, Zenju practiced in the Nichiren Soka Gakkai tradition for 15 years. She entered Zen in 2001 and began again as a beginner on the path. Zenju's practice is influenced by Native American and African indigenous traditions. She participated in ceremony with Ifa diviners from Dahomey, Africa, and briefly studied Yoruba. She was raised in the Church of Christ, where she was an avid reader of the Bible and adored the true mystic teachings on Christ's path well into adulthood. Her work has been featured in Essence, Buddha Dharma, Lion's Roar, On Being, CNN, CBS News, and more. She's the author of several books, including The Deepest Peace, The Way of Tenderness, and Tell Me Something About Buddhism. Today, Osho Zenju Earthlyn Manuel is with Banyen Books in conversation about her latest book. It's titled The Shamanic Bones of Zen, Revealing the Ancestral Spirit and Mystical Heart of a Sacred Tradition. This book explores the connections between contemporary Zen practice and shamanic or indigenous spirituality. Zenju builds a compelling case for discovering and cultivating the shamanic elements in Zen, many of which have been marginalized by colonialist and modernist forces in the religion. She also offers guidance for developing practices of ritual, such as preparing a sanctuary, engaging in chanting practices, and deepening embodiment within ceremony. Zenju sees Zen and all meditation practices as shamanic in nature. Zen is living in ritual and ceremony, and through those activities, especially Zazen, we come to see and know the chaotic and sublime nature of our lives. If you'd like to learn more about today's honored guest, you can visit her website, which is Zenju, ZENJU.org. Banyen Books community, please join me in a warm welcome for this evening's guest. Welcome, Zenju Earthlyn. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to our conversation this evening.
Me too. One of the things that actually in the afterword of the book, you wrote, I am constantly asked to give Dharma talks as that has become the way. But talks in the way they are usually structured cannot engage the mind and body in the way ritual and ceremony can. And this theme of fully engaging our mind and body in everything that we do runs through the whole book. So I'm wondering, do you have any pointers, or what's the best way for us as listeners to fully engage in a Dharma talk?
Okay, that's a very good question. I do want to also acknowledge the Tiwa in this New Mexico land that I live on, and all the Apache tribes and the 19 Pueblos and the many, many people that I think hold the sacred of this land. It's a very sacred land, and that's why I chose it as a second home, because I'm a native Californian. So I think the teaching of being still, breathing in and out, and listening as a teacher is speaking has been dropped or sometimes not explained a lot. And so when in the Dharma talks in Zen, when I first started, you know, you're still in the posture that you take when you're doing meditation. And you usually have your eyes glancing down like we do. We have ours slightly open, glancing down at a point, and just breathing in and breathing out and allowing the body to take in the message as opposed to the mind. And so it's really difficult, you know, people break out their notebooks and start writing, and or they're thinking, they're already, you know, have a question before you're done, and these kinds of things. And so it makes it seem as though we're in school or there is a lecture, and not saying anything's wrong with that, but it's a different way of experiencing the teachings. One thing that I always share with my students is that the teachings are like new beloveds. You're developing a new relationship. And so you need to listen. You wouldn't stop and take notes. You were born where? You know, and you're just kind of listening and watching and witnessing and hearing and getting to know the teachings, you know, through your lived experience. It can only be through your lived experience. So breathing is the main place. And I found that when I sit that way and listen to a talk, just breathing and taking it in, the words themselves are transformed into an applied experience of life on its own. Like I don't have to translate it into my life. It just happens if I'm breathing and listening, still in zazen, still in meditation, still in that place. So often we'll say we're going to have a meditation, and then everyone sits and they're very quiet. The bell rings and everyone goes boom. They jump out of the container that has been set for them to receive the teachings, rather than staying in that place of breathing, so that you can take it in through the body and not the mind, not as knowledge, because it's the wisdom that you're opening up to. And it's the meditation is helping you to make room in all of your thoughts and, you know, your big life. Make room in your big life to allow something else to come in and rock your world if you want. And maybe not. Maybe it'll be so small you might miss it. Maybe so small. So yeah, breathing, being still, staying in the posture that is best for you in which to receive medicine. Yeah, but you can rest with it.
Thank you. You know, we acknowledge the first peoples of the land that were on here and the ancestors, as you did where you are there in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And you touch on that in the book, is the power of invoking or calling in the ancestors in our practice. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if you can sort of illuminate that area for us. Mm-hmm. How is that done? What is the power in invoking the ancestors?
Yeah, I think various traditions have their ways of invoking ancestors. And the ancestors are anything or anyone that was before us. So a lot of people, you know, they're like, well, I don't really know if I want to look back into that lineage. It doesn't feel good, you know. So it could be your bloodline. It could be the earth, the moon, and the sun. All of that was here before we arrived. All the medicine was here. The trees were here. We didn't have to go, okay, now we're going to go have to find water. You know, our guardians provided it, helped us and directed us to the water, to the medicine and these things. But they were here and they are ancestors. And for me, it's most important because even my presence here right now, my very presence, is because of all that was before me. You know, my speaking is all teachings that were before me. What I speak has been said before, and everyone knows that. I think we hear things over and over. So to acknowledge the lineage of wisdom is important, and to me, and I think important in our practices, so that we're not only trying to get something for ourselves, just for ourselves, and seeing only our life, but seeing, like I love the way the Thich Nhat Hanh community uses the word continuation, that we're continuations, and to understand our lives as that, and to not claim it and own it as my teaching, our teachings. You know, the book, yeah, I might have done the work, but it's a combination of all that has been transmitted from ancestors to now. And so I think it's important. A student came to me once and said, I don't understand this ancestor stuff, you know, and this student was, I think, was in training to be a teacher, a Dharma teacher. And I said, well, you know, and we were in a Buddhist center, and I said, well, the Buddha that we speak of, Shakyamuni Buddha, and the Buddhas before him, or our ancestors to the teachings you're being trained to teach in. And if you're not understanding that, then when you go out to teach, it's going to be based on your ego, as opposed to being acknowledging and humbly doing that the teachings are coming, wisdom from the earth, which is the big ancestor, and then a lineage of wisdom, so that your teaching, you might talk about your life, but it's the teaching itself is not based, what you're sharing is not based only on what you think people should do or how they should be, and you know, your idea of it, but rather you know, coming from a wisdom that has been long existed before, you know, we were a notion. And so I think it's very important to, you know, I want to acknowledge right here too that you lit candles behind you before you came, and I lit mine too. And I think that that is just right there an act in bringing in the ancestors. It doesn't have to be long and involved. It's very simple, you know, and you decide what that is, you know, a placing of a petal of a rose down on the earth or down on an altar to say, I am receiving and sharing. I'm a continuation. I am the seed. I am from the seed, rather. And so, you know, just small gestures. So it's not to say, okay, tell me what I should know. Again, not going back to that knowledge place, but acknowledging the source of life. Yeah.
Thank you. And it brings me back to this idea that runs through your book, and it's a beautifully written, very poetic book, I found. And this idea of bringing our whole being. And we're just wondering what happens when we, you know, like you point to the fact that as practitioners, we can, particularly in your tradition, the Zen tradition, it can become habitual. We can start doing the ceremonies or rituals by rote. So if we're calling in the ancestors or doing a ritual, what is the experiential difference as a practitioner when we actually bring our fullness to it?
Mhm. Again, I think it takes time because you're developing a relationship with the bell or drum or a chant. You're developing the relationship with it. And then when that relationship feels whole and more complete, it's just like in our other relationships. Sometimes we go, okay, I know who you are. And we go on about our business and we forget to continue to hear that voice of the person like in the first time we heard that voice, or see that person with our eyes in the way that we saw them, and not necessarily have to be romantic, but just what we felt. And so, and this is why I love ceremony and bell ringing and chanting, because I think it brings you back to the beginning. It brings you back to Suzuki Roshi's favorite, to beginner's mind, rather than being an expert on the relationship with the teachers or teachings, or expert in relationship to the chanting, or, oh yes, I know all the ancestors, and you just run through and you're half asleep, you're falling asleep, and this kind of thing. And so some of that requires preparation. So you can't be exhausted. Exhaustion is very difficult when you're in, makes ceremony difficult if you're exhausted. And so I invite people to just rest and go to sleep before ceremony. In the back of the book, I have a long protocol about entering retreats, preparing. So what people do is they work, 90 hours, and then they join the retreat Saturday morning and fall asleep. Are they fighting sleep and hunger and everything else because they think they're coming to rest at the retreat, but you rest before. You rest before, so that you're able to engage the teachings, you're able to engage the chanting in a different way that's not so routine. What I like about Zen is you can never know it all. There's just never, it's just never ending, never ending. And we still in this country don't have the full transmission of all the ceremonies, but it's never ending. And even in my long 20 years, there are still things to learn, for me, in terms of ceremony and ritual. And I love it. And it, every time I learn a new one, at first I'm like, oh no, what am I supposed to do? And that's the first thing. But then I just settle in and I close my eyes and I listen, and everyone's trying to memorize the steps, but I'm not. I'm trying to get the dance. How are we going to dance here together? And that helps me, move through, especially if I'm leading it, move through the ritual and the ceremony. So again, the basis for my own way of engaging my body is from Zazen, it's from meditation, so that's always, my way of being, not just what I do at 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock at night or something. It's my way of being. It has become that over time. So I think other traditions have they may not have Zazen, but they have some kind of a foundation to the ritual and ceremony. And when you're able to tap into that, whatever that is, just with the breath, you'll be open enough to engage and to let go of the habit, and like I said, there are ways that in Zen, you maybe you're sitting in the background chanting, and then one time it's your turn to lead the chant, and you're like, oh no, you've been there 5 years listening to this thing, saying chant, and you're like, oh no, I have to lead it. What goes on here? Suddenly no one knows anything. And I think that's beautiful, like that whole shock of like, oh, I don't know, and I've been here 5 years. And I think I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. And there's always that place with the forms and the rituals that, okay, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. And in all the ceremonies I've been in, Native and African, there's always that place where there's an unknown. There's never a ritual or a ceremony that is known. And so to stay awake to that place that's going to open up, you know. So when it's time, you take a leap, even though you don't know what's going to happen when you take that leap.
Thank
Hope
you.
that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, the shamanic roots, the shamanic bones of Zen, you talk about what's been lost possibly, and you just mentioned that there's so many rituals and ceremonies that maybe haven't even made it to America yet from the Asian countries and cultures. Can you help us understand where those shamanic roots originate in the Zen? Like you point to the fact that Shakyamuni Buddha himself was shamanic by nature, but what else was picked up in the Zen tradition as it moved from India through the Himalayas into China, into Japan, and then eventually to America?
Right. So first I want to say that I do talk about the word shamanic, you know, and the use of it, that is problematic. So for all you in the audience who are saying, well, there's a problem, I know, and I tried to address that in the book. I just use this word as a way of expressing an experience of awakening in this book. But in other places, and the word, you know, comes from a particular culture and has been used so many ways that may not have been right. I'm aware. I just want you to know that I'm aware of that. And of course, maybe there could be some other words that could be used. It could be just the bones, because all bones are shamanic, just bones, just roots. It could be just those words used. So I'm already aware that that most paths, spirituality, religion, any kind of philosophy or spiritual philosophies come from the root, come from the earth, come from something very old and very ancient. And so while this is not a book of an academic scholarly book on that lineage, you know, from there to here, there are many, many books though that are wonderful that are out there, but they're in the academia. And so we don't have access to them as easily. So what I have written is not so new to a lot of people, like, oh yeah, I know that already. But it's not talked about in application of practice. It's talked about as an academic subject. There's some wonderful books, and one of the ones I like a lot is Sam Van Shag's book, Buddhist Magic, Healing and Divination. It's a great book, and it's a great study. So anyway, and he also has a book called Tibetan Zen. That's a great study too, that there was a Zen in Tibetan Buddhism. So a more shamanic style. So always the people are living on the earth, right? From the beginning. That's why we're acknowledging the earth that we live on, the people who were here. And so everywhere there's people that were just there who had created their own cosmology, spiritual cosmology. And so that is in every, every continent, every country, you can name it, it was there. And so for Zen, you know, we can go into looking at Shinto, Shingon, and Taoism, and on and on. Even pieces, maybe a whole lot. I don't want to diminish the Vedanta studies, the Vedic studies, which I looked at a lot and love to read. And they're just, you can tell the Buddhism that came out of there. And so Buddhism kind of grew to me, the interest of the emperors and the kingdoms, and got mixed up with, you know, the warring and samurais and all these kinds of things. And what's this? Dogen. is temple. Dogen Zenji, his first, I believe, his first Sangha were samurais coming in to learn how to be more concentrated so they could go out and fight. So imagine that, coming to sit zazen so you can fight better. And so be better warriors. So they had to remove their armor, before they came in to sit. And in that removing of the armor, of course, less and less of fighting was the attention to fighting wasn't there. Dogen was offered a temple by the emperor. I'd like to offer you a temple because he heard about this great teacher, Dogen Zenji, who's the founder of Soto Zen and in Japan. And so he refused it. He refused the temple, from the emperor because he had seen the effects and the influence of that. So I think when it's influenced, just like in any country, by the government or any political leaders or merchant, business side of things, it changes the religion. So the Shinto, Shigon, and Taoism, all of these things were there before the Buddhism that we're practicing came along and became more popular. I don't know if it's still popular. I have traveled to Asia, but I think I need to travel more to really see it, because I like to see things. I don't only like to read it about it. So I did go to several Asian countries to feel Buddhism in the people and from the place it came from. So I think that, I'm just making a point in the book, a very brief one at that, and not a deep one, because I think there are a number of books that can be read to go into that deeper historical lineage and to show you how it came about, in the years and the timeline. And everybody would love that, and we'd have a little chart and everything. But to me, what does that have to do with what we're doing? How we're practicing it. And so I just I think I kind of brought together a teeny bit of the academic and a teeny bit of the practice together. And having met some Buddhist scholars who have, when they finally did practice, were like, oh, whoa, this is very different than what's on the page. and one, and it was beautiful. He was a young man. He came to practice at San Francisco Zen Center with a number of us in the people of color group that was at the San Francisco Zen Center. He didn't particularly come to practice in that group, but he came to sit with us once, and we were all practicing in a practice period in Ongo. And he came to one of our sessions in tears, just tears. And I knew he had been touched. Like in church, they was like, oh, the hallelujah, the Holy Ghost, his bones have been rattled, and I could see it, I could see he had been shaken. And he said, I know nothing. And he had been studying for 4 or 5 years, Buddhist studies. He said, I know nothing, through his tears. And it was just an affirmation of that ancient bone part of the practice, the bone, the root of it. And not what we need to do with it. So we're better at our jobs, better, whatever, better people. It could happen, but it's not a tool. It's a path, not a tool.
I saw your interview with Roshi Joan Halifax at the Upaya Center earlier today, and you said, I'm totally paraphrasing, but you talked about, unless there's weeping, someone hasn't truly engaged the practice or the ritual. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I believe that in all of the ceremonies. I have wept in all ceremonies, African, Native, Zen, any ceremony that I've been. And just so everyone knows, my root practice is Zen. So I don't teach anything. I'm not Lakota, and I don't teach anything in the Native traditions. I'm not a teacher in that tradition. I'm not a pipe carrier or a dancer. And so I don't teach it and I don't talk about it. Same in the African traditions I have come upon, even though there's been transmissions in those practices, I'm not ordained in them. I'm ordained in them in the way that maybe I was born with it inside me because I was brought to it, but not ordained in the sense of sanctioning that happens in these many traditions. So I want to put that on the table. And I think it's important, you know. So let's see, how should I approach it? Say the question again,
Just yeah, you talked about the weeping and how, you know, unless that's happening, you know, have we really fully engaged the ritual or the practice? Are we really going deeply into ourselves or into the practice?
For me, it's a sign. You know, I don't know what the signs are for others, but there is a way of I can feel when I'm open that that something's being touched to me that I can't do myself. That place that you can't do yourself. So if you're weeping and you know how to do that yourself, it might not be it might not be that signal for you. But usually, I think there is some kind of response to the rise of wisdom in one's body. There is a response, and I think mostly it's physical. You might have to discover that on your own, but I think it's everyone has that. Um, Maybe it's just a chill. I don't know, but I don't know why mine is so deep, and it might have something to do with my makeup, my structure. But like when I hear a bell and it's a nice bell, it just I just feel like I'm levitating, and it doesn't matter, you know, where that bell is heard. You know, listening to following the ceremonies of Thich Nhat Hanh's death, every time they rang that bell, I just like was there, you know, and I have a very nice bell too in my house. But when someone else rings it and I can receive it, you know, in a way that, say, one might hear the whispering in your ear of from some being that you've never met, you know, about life. That's how it feels. Like, and it's wordless. It's a wordless experience, but it's felt, and you're touched. And if you're coming in and you're in that weeping place, which most of us come in weeping, you know, from our suffering, that weeping changes. So it's not a weeping of sorrow necessarily, but a weeping of being touched by that which is unseen and normal and unfelt, because we have not been still enough for it to happen, or we haven't put ourselves in a place in which it can happen, which is the place of ceremony. And so that's about as much as I could say about it. There are no words for it, really. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Now, one of the things that you talk about is the rejection of magic and trance in modern Western practice of Zen Buddhism. And I'm wondering if you can touch on what are the roots of this? Is it a colonial thing? Is it this mechanical sort of industrial outlook? Is it a patriarchal thing? Is it all of those things? What are the roots of that?
I touch on it just to say that it happened. So I feel that not only, you know, it's not only the Western turning away from it, we're Eastern turning away from this kind of magical, you know, looking at Buddhism in a magical shamanic way. You know, many people turned away from when we went from Mahayana, say, which is one period of teachings, a school of teachings, to Vajrayana. Vajrayana felt had too many trinkets for some people. And you'll hear people who talk about Zen with, you know, no toys, no, you know, my teacher was of the no toys of school. And And my teacher, Zenke Blanche Hartman, was of the, who is now passed, and I honor her at this moment. And who transmitted to me joy. She didn't transmit knowledge, she transmitted joy of the practice of Zen. And so, you know, her, when she had control of the assembly, you know, sometimes during sashings, there were no bells, no chanting, nothing, you know, maybe just touching the earth, sitting and touching the earth, getting up and touching the earth. That was it. And it was very powerful to me, you know, very powerful to do that for like a whole day or a whole session where there were no, you know, things to tinker with and play with and all that. So there is, so she herself, I think, steered away from this idea of it's more than just this basic sitting and breathing. It's just zazen and nothing else. So even when I would talk to her about you know, magical things, she'd lean over and listen to see what I was saying, you know, about it. And I think she was curious, but it wasn't her way of seeing Zen. And so Easterners, Westerners, everyone, there is just this group, there's a school, there's a feeling that going into having all of this is more than what's needed. I think some of it is colonialism for Westerners, maybe trying to get Buddhism to fit into an American society, you know, to bring something that only, you know, Asians were practicing and had as their base, and not understanding that, and, you know, the dominance, of course, of Christianity, but the dominance of a non-mystical Christianity, which some people call a Christendom type of, you know, like kingdom, Christendom, DOM, kind of, not Christianity. So the mystical parts of it. So there is in society, in our society, a turning away of that. Turning away of a divination or divinity or seeing or anything like that as true knowing and intelligence. And so it denies a part of who we are as people, all of us, whether we know ourselves to be that way or not. It denies it, and we can walk around denying it. I was very aware of this when my oracle came through me from a lucid dream. The Black Angel oracle came through, and I felt it myself. I was a little bit embarrassed to speak about it. Like, oh, this is that kind of thing that you know, this is hokey, you know. So I was embarrassed. I wasn't excited about it in the beginning, and I hid from it. And but I knew it had come through, and it came through after chanting for 7 years, vigorously chanting, so into being with the teachings of the Lotus Sutra and to chanting. And so I was changing, you know, my cells were changing, things were opening and expanding, and I didn't know myself in that expanded way, you know. So, you know, we evolve. Hopefully we evolve, or what isn't evolved can get stagnant. And I think that's what's happened in Buddhism, you know, as well. I think we're in some stagnant places. One is because we use it as a tool a lot. We don't use it as a path. It's not taught as a path. And we are in a capitalistic society, so a lot of commodification has gone on. I'm part of that commodification, you know, because it is a capitalistic society. We're all a part of it, of the capitalistic society. If you're wearing clothes today, you're part of it. So there's no way out of it. Yep, we're in it. So you're going to eat tonight? Yeah, it's happening with you too. So no way now. No way now. I think that it will. I don't know if I'll be here for it, but I believe that there'll be a change, and there'll be money will make no sense. Again, there'll be that time when money, like, for what, you know, and so you will not need it. to survive. You will need other things to survive. I think we're getting close to that. People with a lot of money don't have everything they need. So we're getting there. I can see it. So anyway, I think that this turning away, I had to finally turn toward it because I was feeling split, very split. And so I turned toward it. I turned toward what is in the Dharma, what is in these practices that open us to this vastness that's so wide that even our own teachers probably can't hold the width, of where we might go, or our own selves can't, because it's so wide and it can be very scary and everything is in it, so that's like why the great practices of wandering the, savannah, wandering the jungle are very important in these ancient traditions, so that you get used to this feeling of, nothing to grasp onto, nothing at all. So you learn that early. We don't. We kind of stay in our houses, and then we go and do Buddhism, and it does the same thing. Our spiritual path that widens us so wide, we don't know what to do with it. And that's where I think more transmission is needed. And not just in Buddhism, I think in many of the spiritual paths that have been brought to this country, it gets to the point and there no one really has an idea of how to deal with the expanded being, the divine being that presents itself in ceremony. We don't know what to do with it. It feels good or it doesn't. We don't know what to do with that. So we turn away or we turn toward it.
So I just want to clarify what you just said. You're saying, through our practice, we come into contact with this expansive divinity. And what might be missing or what we might need more of is, where do we go from that place? And do you mean by that, how do we live our life from that place? Is that what you're saying?
How do we live, and how do we talk about it, experience it, not hide it, be it? Is it going to be cultivated, shunned? Like, excuse me, which mostly it is. It's like, what are you talking about? I mean, there are jokes made in movies when someone is expanded, has an expanded consciousness. That person is considered not to, oh no, we're not going to talk to him. They're shunned. Right. They're rejected, right?
They're
okay,
weird.
so
They're weird.
Yeah, so that is the where we get that from. Our books, our media, and that we don't. So because we don't know what to do with it. In ancient times, there were things for it. There were ceremonies. There was a place that expanded being could be nurtured. Not for the being itself, but for the whole community, for the whole society to receive the wisdom that is needed for the times, which is where we are now, right now, where we are now in these times, unsettling times of darkness, that we are, opening to this vastness and not having necessarily places or people to help cultivate it, so I mean, I see it on Facebook too or something. Sometimes there's comments about, oh no, that person's being a Facebook preacher or something. There's a turning away from spirituality. There's a turning away from spiritual icons and teachers. That's a very old paradigm. It's not being uplifted in this times, is the way I see it. There's a shift. And so no one's necessarily, I won't say no one, but few are able to find, this place of cultivation and being sequestered. I felt I needed that when that oracle came through me. I didn't have any one there to tell me what had happened to me.
Right.
So I just went into Zen. I became silent. Going to Zendo. Bye. You know, and I hadn't been to Zen at all. I don't know how I got there, but I got there, and I just needed to be silent.
Yeah, this is a really good point that you're making. I've had that experience myself, and I know, having worked in the bookshop in Banyen Books for a number of years, people would come in and they had these experiences, and there was no guidance. They had no idea what to do with it. Their families were treating them like they were, weirdos, and they were lost.
Right. Because we are lost in that way. And even the word weird and weirdo it was the word for people who had a divine expansion, right? It's an old word. So we want to be weird. You should want to be weird. That feel good to some folk out there. Oh no. And we're not talking about weird in the worldly sense, how some people use it in that way, but weird in the divine sense, the sense of our greater divinity, than who we are, these beings. This is what I mean. It was said over and over. Thich Nhat Hanh didn't want a stupa, right? He kept saying he didn't want, and they had already gone out and made one. So it was too late. And so he said, just make sure you write on there, if you make this stupa, that it says, I am not in here. And then if they don't understand, write that I'm not out there either. And so that's that divine, to me, expansion. Now, what? Excuse me? How are we to understand that? We can't understand that with our minds. We can only understand that with further ritual and ceremony, and people who understand how to lead and guide. So a teacher in the Dharma is not a teacher because they're profound. They're guides. They should know how to help people guide and recognize when the bell touches someone deeply, and to recognize it and bow to it, and that it's, touch the earth, ashe, yes, been touched, so I think that that's what anybody who you're leading in the ceremony, not because you're a leader, but because you have, for myself, I've experienced it, something that I can see and feel, that I know others can see and feel as well. I'm not special in that way. And then some of us are special, because it happens more often, because we're much wider. We just keep expanding. The more ceremonies we do, not the more books we read. Although you can read my book.
Yeah, it's a great book. Book. Okay, we've got some nice questions from the audience here, if you're ready for that. Okay. There's one from Patricia. Patricia says, there are moments when I sit in meditation that I feel a presence that isn't me. Can you share your perspective on this phenomenon?
When they're in meditation, they said?
Yeah.
So I can't really explain someone else's experience without knowing them and being with them. But I can invite you to see that it's not outside of you. It's not something coming on into, outside. It's just still you. It's just an expanded self, in that way. And for me, that's the way I felt. I think if you don't know yourself to be that way, it can seem like something from the outside. It's always hard for me to talk about these things, because I think I've had these experiences long before Buddhism, when I was a young child in my own bedroom, and my sisters and I shared a room. And I remember that room very well because of the experiences that I had. And one of those experiences, I would be laying down, but in my bed, and my older sister would be over to my left, and my younger sister would be in her crib, kind of at the foot of my bed. So we were all at the same bedroom. And I remember my mother coming in several times, and I would just like, why am I up there on the ceiling while I'm in the bed? And it just would freak me out in the beginning. And then after a while, I just started getting used to it. Is that was something that was a part of me. I never said anything about it. I just knew it was happening. And it wasn't outside of me. It was just an expansion of myself. So I already had, a notion that we were, like they say, beyond this body, but yet this body. So I'm still in the bed, but I'm not in the bed. So I think to just look into it and discover, and don't make anything of it. I was taught that in Zen too. Don't make anything. I think I speak to that in the book. Not to get fascinated necessarily with what you see and feel like, oh my gosh, and that's another thing we do with this awakening and this vastness, is we start making it something. Sometimes I think maybe it wasn't a good idea to make the oracle like concrete book and cards. Like maybe what would have happened if I just let it grow into something else? And I have let it grow. And that's why I'm here today talking, because this is really connected to what has grown inside of me from that dream, that Dharma dream, just like the Buddha. He had Dharma dreams. So, just keep looking at it in the discovery mode. Don't make anything of it. Just be with it.
Thank you. Thanks for your question, Patricia. There's one from Joanne who says, would you speak to end-of-life Zen ceremony for an end-of-life companion or a doula or a hospice caregiver?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a big area. There are many, many people who are trained in this area. What I like about Zen, I have to just love on Thich Nhat Hanh's community for sharing with the world what it looks like. And I would tell people, I would say, have you been watching Thich Nhat Hanh's ceremonies, his death ceremonies? And people saying, yes. I said, that's Zen. That's Zen. That's what I wrote about. So if you watch the ceremonies, maybe you don't have to read the book. Just watch the ceremonies, and because that's what it is, and you can't explain what's happening. But one friend called and said, "Oh my God, he's just laying out there." That in the beginning he was just laying on the bed out there. He's just laying out there, and I said, "That's what we do. We look upon a body, that." The spirit has left that body. We look at the body so we can understand impermanence, and understand, like sit with the relationship of having known a being that's not a being, that a person that's not a person, that's no longer a person in that sense, but is now something else. But we still feel that person. We still feel the person. And so you get a chance to sit with that and to look into it, and for days. And many traditions have this. I mean, Christians, when in my church we had wakes, there were wakes. There were those times when the family came together so they could tell stories, cry, eat, and sleep with the body. So this is not just a Buddhist situation. And I think that our society, we don't have our death rituals. We don't know what to do. We die. Will there be a 10-day ceremony? There should be, because so that there'll be this long, we got to mourn for days. For days, everybody kind of stopped and were watching these ceremonies, even if it was an hour or two. We did, Thich Nhat Hanh died, here's the hour funeral, hour and a half funeral on CNN, and then that was it. And all the dignitaries get up and talk, and that's it. That it was 10 days, 8, 9, 10 days. That's how I love that, because it should happen for everyone. not just Thich Nhat Hanh, but for everyone. And it does happen for all the Zen priests and the monks and nuns. It does happen for each one, not just Thich Nhat Hanh. All those ceremonies, you know, maybe not as large, but it does. There's at least 4 ceremonies in our lineage when a priest dies. Not everybody gets that ceremony because it depends on your relationship with the monastery. So, but I really love that long, drawn out way of being with the letting go of the body, and in the way that we spend a lot of time when someone comes into a body. You know, everyone comes to see the baby, and we spend a lot of time. We keep coming to see the baby over and over and over. The baby, how we call about the baby, you know, and the people who are around the baby. We want to talk to the people around the baby. You know, we're just same way when someone leaves the body is to spend that time. So I think the most important element is spending that time, that grief, that mourning, that stopping. There's so much death, and we need to stop in this country and all over the world, maybe together, just stop for a day and drop the flags. Just stop for all the COVID deaths, COVID-19 pandemic deaths, for all the deaths of anti-hatred, anti-Blackness, anti-everything, all of the dying, the unnecessary dying, and to mourn and to grieve. And there's going to be a lot of death in the next 10 to 20 years. One is because baby boomers are leaving, or they were a big group. That's me too. A big group. We're leaving. And so, you know, it's going to be like that on Facebook. So-and-so died, so-and-so died, so-and-so died. So they said Facebook is going to go away in about 5-10 years because everybody will be dead on it. But baby boomers. You know? So it's going to be phenomenal. What do we do with that space, and what ceremonies are in place for a society, a world, when millions and millions leave? And then there's some who come in, right? There's another big boom in a generation. I think I'm not sure. I think it's the millennials are also as big as the boomers. I'm not sure. But, you know, if we're coming back to the earth in the way we are in terms of climate change, then we need to come back to the earth as well as ourselves as earth, and how we take care of the earth when it's in demise and when it's in the rise. Demise and rise. How are we taking care of this earth? Because that's how we're going to take care of earth. It's all together. It's all one thing.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question, and it's a longer question, but I think it's a nice, it brings things full circle. It's from Chris, and Chris says, "Buju Zenju, I am an indigenous person residing south of the medicine line, where our colonial government has never made much effort to acknowledge the relationship between what they've done to our people and what it means to those of us who are alive due to the sacrifices of our ancestors. I tend to find land acknowledgements such as those given this evening by both yourself and Ross at least irritating and often offensive. They are particularly uncomfortable in situations where I am the only indigenous person in the room or one of few. Yet never have I heard them described as a practice, inviting in of our ancestors to whatever experience we are about to share. And now my head is teetering on the brink of explosion. What a beautiful way to think of them. In most cases, I don't believe the people delivering the acknowledgement understand the ancestral invitational nature of what they are doing. But is it enough that I do?"
It is enough that you do, but it's also that we do. And I acknowledge it from my many places of ceremony for 20 years. I acknowledge it from the songs I sing and that I have sung and drummed, and for the dancers I have supported, and for the sacrifices I have made, flesh sacrifices, in the name and prayer of natives in this country. So I don't speak of it as a I don't take it as, oh, I'm just saying that, look what I knew, I looked it up on Google. I'm speaking from an experience personally, and you don't know me, so you don't know that I am speaking from that, and that I have wept around the round drum, and wailed around the round drum for what has happened. I too understand that there needs to be, and I wish I had the article here with me, but more of not just acknowledgement. And I'm wondering what you would like to see us do, but more than acknowledgement, but also to take part in the lives of people in some way. I don't mean, running down to pueblos and reservations to do that. That's not what I'm asking people to run down and do, because that tends to be a big problem as well. But to really come to an understanding of what has happened. And I feel in my blood, I do understand that. I'm not coming from a place of not having experienced it and not being a part of Native communities, because I am a part, and I have been a part for 20 years. So I speak from that place. I'm new to New Mexico, so I don't know, and I know I came here because I do have participated in ceremony here, and but I get irritated too. I have to say, I'm very irritated by it. I join in because I want to people to see the interconnection, not just to see the Native American, because if we're just focused out, then there's no interconnection. So there is an interconnection, not with just the Native American, but the land itself, and what has happened on the land. And when I say it, and I have been really afraid to say it sometimes, because it feels like it directs away from what the acknowledgement is that there's a lot of blood on this land, and some of that is African blood as well. And that African blood is not being acknowledged at all in this process too. So, and Africans were here before slavery as well. So what happened to them? And what is our relationship going to be? Is it going to be a relationship of calling out or helping to support a better way of acknowledging what has happened? It's easy to call out. That's just as easy as me acknowledging. That's easy. I acknowledge, you call out, good night. Nothing's done in that. Nothing is done in that. Open your heart to something bigger and help with this movement of interrelationship with all of us, each other. I think it's important to mention, not to say don't do it. You can't censor anyone. There's no censorship. But there is, I think, a way in which that I do acknowledge it's, superficiality, but I don't feel that for myself personally. It's just not coming from that place. I think if I had never been in ceremony, I wouldn't say anything. So I'm saying it from so many years of ceremony, and I did those ceremonies right alongside my Zen practice. So did I chant on land? No, that's not. I didn't mix them. I don't mix them. I see them very as traditions of their own. And I also see the crossroad. I do stand at the crossroad. Which way are you going? I'll probably go that way too. Which way are you going? Because I've been down those paths. Oh, you're going to that temple, but yeah. So thank you for bringing that forward. It's not the first time this has happened. It's happening more and more on the Zoom meetings. I think it wouldn't happen at all if we didn't have Zoom. So there's also that dynamic. And yeah, that's all I can say about it.
Thank you so much. And thanks, Chris, for bringing that up. We've been speaking with Zenju Earthlyn Manuel about her latest book, The Shamanic Bones of Zen, revealing the ancestral spirit and mystical heart of a sacred tradition. Her website is Zenju, Zenju, or if you're in the US, zenju.org. And thanks to everyone who's here live. The field that's created with everyone being here live is such a beautiful thing. Of course, you can see the recordings of the podcast on our YouTube channel. Look for Banyen Books. Follow us and subscribe. Turn on notifications. You can also find us on any of the audio podcasting platforms of your choice. Huge thank you to our podcast producer and events curator, Jacob Steele, for everything that he does. And again, Zenju, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, and wishing you all the best in your work.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It was a good conversation. I can see we can go on for days. And I just invite everyone to read the book and to continue asking questions based on having read the book and understanding where I'm coming from, not deciding where I'm coming from by the title of the book. This is the new way now. People just read the title and they've read the book. So I'm encouraging to go a little further than chapter 1 and to really discover the experience that I'm sharing there, and not to make assumptions. Try to see, and then try to see in your own life, the experiences of the bones, of the roots of all spiritual practices. My last word.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for Branches of Wisdom, a podcast of Banyen Books and Sound, Canada's spiritual and healing resource since 1970. Our podcast producer is Jacob Steele. The show is edited by Abdo Habani. And I'm your host, Ross McKeechee. Watch all our conversations on YouTube by searching for Banyen Books, or listen on your favorite podcast platform. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews and comments. We love to hear from you. For all our live events, books, and more, visit us at banyen.com.